Shane Murphy here, entrepreneur and restaurant marketing expert. Welcome to the Restaurant Rocket Fuel podcast, where we discuss marketing strategies that leading restaurateurs are using to grow and expand their restaurants. This podcast is sponsored by Boostly, the text marketing company that works with every point of sale and online ordering vendor in the industry. No contracts, no monthly fees. Learn more at boostly.com. Welcome back, everyone. We are thrilled to have Jerry Hancock with us today. Jerry and his wife are the founders of SubZero Ice Cream, which has 27 units and probably the most interesting ice cream concept that I've ever experienced. They've had a lot of national attention across most news outlets and appeared years ago on Shark Tank as well. Jerry, thank you so much for coming on today to share a bit more about your story with us.
Well, thank you. I'm honored to be able to be interviewed or go through the podcast.
Yeah, you bet. Maybe before we dive in too far, can you tell us more about your background and the story behind SubZero?
You know, it's kind of interesting because I really think that everybody has a unique background. So everybody has unique experiences as they go through life. So I'm not any different than that. So it's to get through college, I had some mechanical experience. I worked on F-16s to help pay for college. And then I took industrial design, which is product development. Did a year of that. I also got a patent while I was doing that, and I was going to trade shows. But I was also taking chemistry, and I eventually ended up graduating in chemistry. Told my wife, I said, well, I think buying a franchise might be a good way to learn how to run a business. So we bought a New York burrito franchise, which is kind of a wrap franchise. But we weren't doing as well as we needed to, so we needed to add something. So the product development, experience kicked in, started asking people what they wanted, and that's where ice cream came into play. And I couldn't afford the freezers, and the ice cream manufacturers said, "Well, if you're not in a great location," they said, "don't add ice cream." They said it'll just be dollar in, dollar out. I said people just go right past you; it won't really help you. And so I did my research, checked on some places they just added ice cream as an afterthought, and that was true. The ice cream as an afterthought is a bad idea. So that's where things started, was like I had to figure out something different. And so I went back to the customer and said, what do you like about other people's product? And it all came down to customization. So the only thing I could think of to make it more custom, and this is about 2004, was I defined it as you had to start with the liquid, because the only way to flavor an ice cream is to start with the only way to make it more custom is to change the flavor. The only way to change a flavor in ice cream is start before it's a solid. So it came back to that chemistry of like states of matter, and you have to start with the solid so it can dissolve through. And that's where things started. And then my wife left an article out on liquid nitrogen. And I was like, well, that's it. We can make it in seconds. And then it was a lot of testing, about 4 or 5 years of testing to get it really right. And probably another 5 more to really get better systems. So about 10 years really in the making before we really felt confident that we could expand.
That's fantastic. And for those who haven't had experience with like SubZero and the liquid nitrogen process, I first experienced this when I was going to school in Provo, Utah, and went to a SubZero location. And it's unlike anything that you ever experience. You walk in, and you at the start of the line, they're not scooping like ice cream out of a barrel. It's this liquid that goes through this process. And maybe can you describe what happens as you go down that line?
It's funny because when we opened originally in that first test location with the New York burrito, I had somebody come in and they said, "When are you going to open up the ice cream shop?" And I said, "What do you mean it's open?" He says, "Where's the freezers?" And I was like,
Yeah.
"Oh, that's a missing concept of visually." So what we do is we start with the definition of the product is custom made to order. So we start with the liquid, so you can pick between a premium ice cream, a low fat, a custard, a vegan, um, keto, Italian ice, a variety of different mixes, and then you get to pick your flavors. Now our flavors are concentrated; they're made for us. They're specifically designed for this process, and then we add the flavors. So you can mix your flavors. So if you want a strawberry cheesecake, you can make strawberry cheesecake, but we don't have strawberry cheesecake. We have strawberry or cheesecake. But then if you do an and add them together, then it becomes that new flavor. So you can create new flavors from our palette. And then you add a mix in, and then we freeze it. It takes about 15 seconds. We came up with a patented process that creates a layering effect, really. So it's and we patented that process of those layers forming. So anyway, and then we scoop it. It takes and if it's too hard, then we can soften it, and then if it's too soft, then we can harden it so you get it to the right texture. So we're in a store in Massachusetts, one of our stores we opened this last year, and we had people, science people, they were there, and just kids, and they were just like, just their minds were just going like, well, how many
Yeah.
combinations is this? So they did the math just in there as a family, and they came back to me and they said, you have 3 quadrillion flavor or options, and I'm like, yeah, it's about right. And but it just kind of blew their mind. It's like I have 3 quadrillion choices to make. So anyway,
Yeah, because there's nothing like that moment when, as a consumer, like the first time experiencing SubZero ice cream, you see it go from liquid, and then like it's like this liquid nitrogen just turns that into a solid like instantly, and boom, you have ice cream.
right,
And it's like you see the whole creation process that in traditional ice cream you don't experience, and it's a really fun and unique concept to be able to have as a consumer. And I imagine that is a different experience. You talked about how there's some education, like this isn't,
yeah.
it's not out of a barrel, there aren't freezers, and
Mhm.
there's a new concept.
Yeah, people
But
walk in off the street and they're tourists, and they so they don't have any idea what they're expecting. And they
yeah,
walk in and they go, "Okay, I want this flavor ice cream." Okay, and then I start pouring out some liquid. And they're like, "What are you gonna make me?" And I'm like, "Well, just wait." And then you blast the nitrogen, and you get this kind of um, and then they just jump, and it's like, and then they giggle, and
yeah,
it's that excitement. And it's like, okay, wow. And I think there's a factor of, well, edutainment. There's
yeah.
because a lot of there's several BYU and UVU chemistry classes that actually offer extra credit to come into our store and write a paper on it.
Oh, fascinating.
So it's every year we get this crowd of like college kids that come through and write a report on how it's happening or what's happening.
It's probably a really unique form of marketing, is going through that university, and those professors just
Yeah,
they're marketing you through the
right.
science class, but you're
Yeah.
getting exposure to all of those students along the way. I imagine you guys have been doing this, you know, a very long time now,
Hmm.
and I imagine marketing has shifted through the years, and there's been an awareness process that has happened with SubZero. Maybe in the early days, what did marketing look like for the stores as you were starting out, and how did that shift and change as the years have gone by?
Well, you figure like we started 2005,
Mhm.
really. So it was pre-Facebook, um, pre-social media really, taking off. So we've had to adapt quite a bit over the years. Now, when we started, it was print, so it was a lot of like mailers and things like that. But fairs were important to try and get the in-person events. And as time's gone on, then that's been less important to move the needle and more important to make content. which I think is good because I've often said, because we do STEM education as well, so we go into schools and present a STEM program, and then
Okay.
the last thing we do is we talk about ice cream. So I prefer doing that than anything, just because I've always had a belief that a business had to have a bigger person than money,
Yeah.
and so my purpose is STEM education, and so I wouldn't say it's our front and focus to most people, but it's not uncommon for me to say that we're an education company first, and we just happen to make really good ice cream.
That's a fantastic concept, and it is you are in a very unique place with your brand to be able to do that where others just can't. It's actually a competitive advantage
Mm,
that you have for marketing, which a lot of sometimes if you look deep enough at like a restaurant brand or concept, when you find unique things about you or your brand,
mhm.
if you can lean into that and use that, it gives you a marketing advantage that others just cannot compete on. A lot of people can compete on price or on discounts or on, you know, the everyday things. But if you can find that competitive advantage that makes you different or makes you unique, even if it's just part of your story, that makes a difference from a marketing perspective, and you've been able to capitalize on that through STEM and through education and the connection that you have with that. Um, Now, I believe it was back in 2013. You also had the experience of going on ABC's Shark Tank
Right.
show. Um, can you tell us about that experience of how that actually came to be? And would love to hear about the impact that that either had or didn't have through the process.
Um, well, we had. I mean, I've always liked the idea of going on Shark Tank, but I love that show. We were on season 4, so it was fairly early,
Yeah,
in the cycle that we're in now with Shark Tank. Um, but there still was 40,000 applicants that season, and so I just knew we were going to get on because I knew we made a good process or a good show. And when it comes to going on a show like that, it's more important. Even though the sharks will look at the business itself, the that's not who picks who gets on the show. The producers pick who get on the show. So you've got to be
yeah,
good. You've got to be good TV. If you're not good
yeah,
TV, you're not going to get on the show. Um, so you got to pick your audience, and with that process, you have to kind of shift because you shift from the producers to the sharks, and so you're so being able to shift your pitch is interesting. But even though when you're in there, like we really felt like we had Barbara, we would have gotten a deal. But we had Lori at the time; they were switching off,
sure.
and so we always felt like that was we. So when we heard what our panel was, and it's really the day of, um, then it's like, all right, number one goal, get on TV, because it doesn't mean if you film, you're going to get on TV.
Yeah,
So be good TV. In other words, likable. And so we focused on being likable so that we get on TV rather than focusing on making sure we got a deal. Um, but and when it comes down to it, you can't, even if the shark doesn't understand your business. Like I would say that most of the sharks don't understand franchising. Barbara's the only one that understands franchise business, in my opinion. And I'm not trying to be condescending to the rest. I'm just
yeah,
saying she just is the only one that understands it. It's a very unique business model,
yeah,
and when you can't really correct them on in the tank. Well, you don't understand. Well, okay, if they're
yeah,
if they're not getting it, then you can't correct them. That becomes bad TV
sure.
very fast. It was great exposure and it had really good validation, but the problem with it is that most of the products are products that sell online,
Yeah,
and they make a lot of money really, really fast. Okay, from the exposure. Selling franchises is a slow process. It takes a lot of time.
Yeah.
You have to do, due diligence, and there's a lot more money on the line, and there's regulations where you can't sell something too fast. Like there's a 16-day cooling off period when you're buying a franchise, where mandated by the federal government. So you have to let them, and be honest. If you talk somebody into franchising and really break some of the rules, the liability is really high. I mean, it's through the roof. As far as it could be 10, 20 times what you actually get in that sale, the liability, if you don't follow the rules. So it's very tricky. So it didn't actually help us sell that many franchises. I think it did, as far as when you're just because of validation. But I don't think, like, right off the bat, it didn't give us a lot of cash
Yeah.
versus other places where they got a lot of cash. They had a lot of cash really fast. Um, but
Which I think can be a misconception in our industry, where people see different like brands go on Shark Tank, and they hear different stories, and they mix the like e-commerce brands
mhm,
and the explosion effect that they get
mhm,
from Shark Tank.
right,
And they think, wow, if I can get my restaurant concept or my food truck, or you name it, restaurant industry vendor on Shark Tank, I will magically blow up. And there there it's important to understand how it can impact your business, because it also takes a lot of time and preparation, and can be a large distraction, I imagine, from many of the other things that you do. And just knowing like the real background of, hey, how can this impact my business, and what should I expect it to do, and lining those two things up is really, really important. And so that's an important story to share.
yeah, and the people don't realize, like, franchising is, like I said, is a unique business, and people often think, well, you're franchising, you're like this one thing Robert said. He says, well, you're taking money, aren't you, from people? Isn't that, why do you need money? And I go, well, you don't understand the breakdown, I guess, of how the sales are. You spend 40, 50%, but sometimes 80% of the revenue in commissions when it comes to brokers and lead generation and things like that on a sale like that. And then, and you really don't get enough royalty, to really keep on expanding. It might cover your base cost, but you can't really expand. So you kind of have this front loaded, um, franchising is very expensive, front loaded,
Yeah.
until you get to a certain mass. And so, but you don't really want to grow too fast because that causes liability. Um, so um, that's my opinion. So you want to kind of grow, you kind of be, it's kind of I call it the Goldilocks effect. You don't want to be too fast. You don't want it to be too cold. You just want to be just right. And that's difficult to do, when you're growing with, like the way we've done, we were just been all organic.
Yeah.
Um, but you know you so anyway, trying to get that balance is key. And when you're early stage, you tend to wear too many hats. And so oftentimes I've learned over the years is that wearing all the different hats can be distracting and not efficient. And so, I see you've got traction behind you on the book.
Yeah.
So,
Uh-huh.
I like that model, but you got to get to a certain mass in order to really incorporate traction into your business model. One of my goals is to try and incorporate that business model into our business.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, we've run our business through like the EOS model, and
Mhm.
we we love it, but you do have to have infrastructure in place
You got to
and the business
separate the
running.
hats. I
Yep,
mean, that's the
certainly.
whole idea by creating the integrator and the innovator is you at
Yep,
least have to get to that point where you can separate those two hats.
yep, absolutely. And so, as you're looking at the business today, and you know, you know, when you have a franchise business, it's not you're kind of describing the royalties and things there. And one of the crucial components is making sure that store level sales are successful,
Hmm.
and that the store is empowered to actually bring the revenues that they need to operate, as well as that's how the franchisor continues to grow and expand as time goes on as well. What are some of the things at the store level that you've seen your franchisees do that have led to successful store sales from a marketing perspective?
Number one thing is the stores that do the best are the ones that are in the community the most. So they where we had some failure in particularly one state, it was all one group. It was a learning effect, for us. But they came from either one of two backgrounds. They came in from Subway or um, convenience store, um,
Okay.
backgrounds. The problem with that is that a lot of times that is just people happening onto your. You don't see a convenience store marketing,
Yeah.
except for maybe Maverick, which is massive, right? Something like that. But but you don't see it's a convenience. You just happen to be it's in your path. And
Yeah.
but so changing those people's mentalities where they need to get into the store. So I talked to our store that did the best over the years. I asked him, I said, what did you do? And I thought it was some of the media that he got attraction from, because he had some really viral stuff on social media and from somebody else. Okay, so it was an influencer, and and so um, and I expected that to be his number one thing, but it wasn't. I said, what did you do? And he says, I consistently had bookmarks in schools. That's it. So just making sure you're in the community. That, we have a bookmark with a reading schedule on the back. That's the number one thing. Now, we notice, for instance, in addition to bookmarks, if we just go around our store to the businesses and pass out coupons, that makes a big difference. There's where your office is, I'm surprised because we've done catering up there because we've done coupons. So we've done catering for businesses, and it's as I talk to the people that work in that area, I expected them to be more commuters that live further away, but most of the people that work right there, they live pretty dang close. They don't live very far, so they're our prime customer.
Yeah.
And so being out in the community, passing out a coupon here and there, sampling. What we do in Provo is we just stand outside the door with the tank and make ice cream at night and sample, and about half of the people that take a sample come in and buy an ice cream.
Fascinating.
So it's not the flashy, you know, it's the old school guerrilla marketing.
Yeah. And that's the thing. If you have the combination of a good product, especially if there's something unique there,
Mm-hmm.
um, and you couple that with, you know, like the just being in front of your target,
Mm-hmm.
those two things, if you do it, apply that consistently, will bring people back to you. And having the good experience is what generates the repeat customer.
Right.
They know I had a good experience. If I'm coming back and I have another good experience, I now can expect consistency from this brand, and I know it's going to be good, and I'll bring my friends because I trust it. Um, and then just getting in front of people. That connection, whether it's through the bookmark, whether it's through sampling in front of the store, or a movie series at the park, or your professor asking you to write a paper on it, that consistency of being with the community and having a unique and good product will be a winning equation every single time. And so, Jerry, thank you so much for coming on today and sharing your story, your experiences. You've gone through many different phases of the business through the years, and things that many operators have dreamed of being able to accomplish. So we really appreciate you coming on and sharing
I've got
your
a lot
story.
lot to learn, and I'm learning that I can't learn it all. But I'm going to leave one last note.
Please.
One of the things that I've found as I've gone through the business, especially with employees, that oftentimes people are afraid to learn, and they give them something. Well, I used to work at Novell, and I was a tester, and they gave me this product to work on, and I was really intimidated because a network protocol, but it was a specific, and it hadn't even been built yet. So all I had was the RFP definition from the standards.
Sure.
And I'm reading this thing and it makes no sense. But you got to keep on going. You can't give up. And I so my point is, don't be afraid to learn something. Just don't be afraid to learn something.
I love that. That
And
is
and don't expect somebody else to do it for you. So I've hired people where they said, where they're supposed to have good management experience, but they were supposed to do a certain project. And they come on board and they go, now I got to hire somebody to do the project. And I go, well, that's what I hired you for. It's,
yeah,
you got to, don't expect somebody else to do it for you.
certainly. That is wonderful advice. Jerry, thank you so much for sharing. How can the audience follow you or SubZero and keep track of you guys?
We're on Facebook. I've got a LinkedIn. I'm more active now than I have been in a while. So I've been trying
Okay.
to post. I sometimes get a little self-conscious, so sometimes I don't post as much as I like to. Uh, but or I think I should. And you can contact us through the website, SubZeroIceCream.com. The full episode is there on the website for Shark Tank. So if you'd like to see that, if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer any questions. Anybody wants to talk about patents or that type of thing, how to get a patent, what it requires, whether I think it's patentable or not, the pluses and the cons, it's not all pluses to have a patent, because you have to protect it. And but at any rate, but it's certainly an advantage. So anyway, just those types of things. So if anybody wants to reach out, I'm have my contact information on LinkedIn, so my phone number is pretty wide open.
Awesome. Well, Jerry, thank you for making yourself available, and thanks again for coming on the show today.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks, Shane.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of Restaurant Rocket Fuel. And thank you to the amazing restaurateurs that work so hard to provide an amazing guest experience for our communities. Again, this podcast is sponsored by Boostly. To see how we can drive more revenue to your business, visit boostly.com. Don't forget to subscribe and go out there and maximize the potential that you and your business have in front of you.